Okay, check 1 2. Check 1 2. Testing, testing. We will see if this works now. Sorry about that. If you guys got a bunch of notifications about a live, we were having some audio issues. I'm not sure exactly why, but they seem to be resolved right now. Please comment in the chat if you see this and the audio is working. Hopefully it is at this point. Let me turn down this a little bit. It's a bit loud. Maybe. Okay, so should be a decent stream tonight, and hopefully this reaches some people. But like I said, please let me know if the audio is working in the chat. Please hit the like button; it helps fuel the algorithm. And comment any questions that you may have throughout the video. So tonight we are going to be discussing this stream. Right here, Embodied Minds and Cognitive Agents. And it's with Michael Levin, and it's on this channel, Cognitive Revolution, How AI Changes Everything. We've talked about Michael Levin before, and his work is just truly mind-blowing. Audio is clear. Thank you. Good to know. He does a lot of work with what are called xenobots and planaria, and his work mainly is around. I mean, it more or less it is about consciousness, but it's much more than that, and it's about the application of different techniques in order to stimulate certain events within cellular clusters, essentially, in many cases. And he's created things called xenobots, and he works with planaria, as I stated before, which some of the implications of his work have potential implications on my work, even with sentient singularity theory, but we will talk about it tonight. I wanted to discuss a few things to get started, though, before we do that, which is I had this idea, and we'll talk more about it in the future, but wanted to share it, that there would be multiple stages of development of your consciousness, of every conscious being's development, I guess. So 4 stages of development, and in the lifetime of one sentient agent. And so one of the things that I wanted to see was that if I could notice this in the development of my recent child. As many of you know, if you follow me, I recently had my first child, and I've been watching her grow and learn the world and learn me and my wife and anyone else around, our dogs, everything that she has to experience in the world that is brand new. And I was hoping that this would teach me, some important lessons about conscious development. And I knew it would. And this sparked an idea with me that I wanted to share. But first, this is a video that my wife took that I would like to share, that shows her just kind of learning the controls of her own body. So here you go. And it's just a small video, but you can see she's staring at her hand, and she's just looking at it, like she's trying to move it a certain way, and you can tell that she's like very intent. It's kind of funny because she's like crossing her eyes because it's so close to her face. But another thing that she has to learn is how to manipulate in her eyes. But you can tell that she's very, very aware of that her hand is moving, and she's trying to get it into her mouth. This is like an important development for babies, is like once they start tasting their own hands and things like that. And she's just she has started reaching that. But this video to me was just fascinating, and it just shows such a level of intentionality, I think, that seems to be apparent with what she's trying to do. It's not just moving around. It's like trying to move a specific way. And this got me thinking quite a bit. And so I think I have come up with these 4 stages that I think are probably pretty accurate. And the first one is um, being in control of your own body. And this is like where she's at. And it's you learning how to control your physical body the way that you would want to in order to accomplish a certain goal, like putting your hand in your mouth, like standing up and walking, like kicking your feet or whatever. This is a stage of development in humans that happens in babies and infants, babies, and before toddler stage, I would say, but maybe going a bit into the toddler stage. But I think that baby stage is kind of defined by this, and then toddler stage is the next stage of conscious development. So, which would be the ability to control your objects around you. Okay. So first you learn to control your own body. You learn to put your hand in your mouth. You learn to stand up. You learn to walk. Then you hit the toddler stage in humans, and you learn to control objects around you. So this is why toddlers are so destructive and they do stupid things all the time. I distinctly remember taking a paperclip and putting it inside a light socket, and after knowing that I shouldn't do it, but still just wanting to try it, and you're breaking things and you're just pushing things over, and you're like a cat. You're just constantly like breaking stuff. And this is because you're testing the world around you. You're learning how to control the objects that you view as separate from yourself. You've realized that that you can control your own body, and you can go where you want to go and touch the things that you want to touch. And now you're trying to control those things that you're touching. So that would be the second stage, and how it manifests in humans. The third stage is how to control other people. And this is a stage that happens, I think, mostly in children, but all of these, have overlap and are, kind of continuous. So I'm not saying that there's hard lines, but these are just the different phases of conscious development is these four. Learning to control your body, learning to control other objects that you view as distinct from yourself, and then learning to control other beings around you, which is people for people, usually, at least to start. And this is in children. You learn how to manipulate, first and foremost, your parents by crying in order to get attention, or asking one parent for something when you know that the other parent would say no. You want to go to your friend's house or something, and you ask the parent that you know is going to say yes versus asking the parent that you know is going to say no. Just acting in a way that is ultimately manipulative. I'm not saying that it's malicious, but it is manipulative, and it's an important stage of human development, I think. And because what it shows somewhat of an understanding of you and your own self and your emotions and your physical body and the objects around you. It's incorporating all of these understandings that have led up to this point, and each one of these stages would do this. And then after this, I think that this goes on, for quite a bit of time for most people, maybe even forever in everyone. But eventually there's a fourth stage that I'm not sure if everybody gets to be quite honest. And it would happen probably as an adult, not, you're past your teenage years, you're in your 20s, 30s, something like that, 20s or 30s. And maybe it happens way later in life for some other people. But these are the four that I think would happen, at least given my current understanding of life. And the fourth one is how to control your own mind. And I'm not sure everybody gets to this, because to some degree it takes a bit of understanding of how your mind works. And what this usually requires is some type of event in your life that changes your worldview and kind of humbles you, because it shows you that you thought you understood all these things, but you actually didn't. But your mind tricked you into thinking that you did. Richard Dolan, who's a historian who talks about UFOs quite a bit. I really like his content. He's been on a bunch of different channels that I follow, and he's got his own YouTube channel. He's been on Theories of Everything with Kurchai Mungol, which is a channel we talk quite a bit about. And he's one of the best voices of the UFO topic, I think, because he's just so measured even though I don't agree with him on everything that he, you know, uh, has as an idea of what could be going on with this phenomenon. He is so measured in how he approaches the subject. And he talks about on his YouTube channel once, at least, that people who reach a stage in their life where all of a sudden something that they thought was just one way that's kind of interwoven into a lot of different aspects of your life is actually another way. And so, and it's usually caused by kind of some humbling experience, or it is humbling in and of itself, and it alters your entire worldview. And he said that this happened to him with UFOs, where, you know, he thought it was just nonsense, and then he saw something in the sky and couldn't deny what he had seen, and then went and looked things up because he was a historian, and that was his talent and his craft, and he found all these documents from the United States government that seemed to suggest that they were taking it very seriously, at least. And it changed his entire worldview. And I had this experience with kind of morality and politics, and then it led to a theophany where I went from being a self-described atheist, or anti-theist is the reality of that, what I was, to being a theist, and through a process and some key incidents in my life. But it was extremely humbling because it showed me that I thought that I was thinking about all of these things, and the reality was that I wasn't. And I've said before that one of the important moments in this for me was I was making dinner with my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, and it was pretty early in our relationship. And she was a theist already, and I am very interested in zoology and biology and herpetology, reptiles and amphibians. I have been my entire life, studied them, and so I knew a lot about the natural world and just selective pressures and, you know, evolution. And I asked her once, I said, so do you believe that God created the universe, or that we evolved, you know, or that, you know, evolution exists? And she just looked at me and she was like, both. And I was like, wow, I've never thought that those were not mutually exclusive ideas before. Never really realized that they were not mutually exclusive ideas. And it takes sometimes a pretty girl to get you to question your world. But I was already morally questioning so many things because of some political events. And that led me down, you know, the path already to just a reconsideration of a lot of fundamental views. And this, though, this type of experience in your life where all of a sudden so many things changed that you were so sure of, what it really is that you realize that you weren't thinking about them, and you thought that you were thinking about them. I thought that I was thinking about theology, and to some degree I was, but I was it's a bit complicated. It's because I had a very abbreviated, you know, dumbed down version of theology taught to me when I was a child, and I grew up in a secular home with people who did not understand the depth of theology, and so I had a child version of it, and that wasn't enough for me, and it's not enough for a lot of people, and that's part of why we have, you know, kind of abandoned theology as a serious idea in scientific circumstances. But the point is that this caused me to question my whole world, because I realized I wasn't thinking. And Richard Dolan has talked about this, and he said that if you don't go through this type of experience in your life when you're in your 20s or 30s, his thought is that, his hypothesis is that that's basically it, absent some type of external world-changing event in your life, maybe a near-death experience or something like that, or maybe as you approach, you know, death in old age and you confront your own mortality, all these things that are not the norm, but you don't just go through them because you want to. If you haven't by the time you reach your 40s, is kind of the date that he put on it. And this is very interesting, and because this why 40, is or your 40s. And even in Jewish metaphysics, you're not supposed to study Kabbalah, which is Jewish metaphysics, until you're like 40 years old, historically, because you get locked you into certain patterns of life at that point in your life. Usually, I think, is what it is. It's not that 40 is an important number. It's that around that time you've got a wife and kids and a job and responsibilities, and your priorities and incentives are aligned a certain way. Whereas prior to that, it's much more likely that you are self-centered in your focus, and so maybe you shouldn't learn about how to the world's metaphysics work, because you're not wise enough to wield that, or you reach a certain point in your life on the other side of this, where once you have all these routines, you've got kids, wife, family, responsibilities, job, and you've been around long enough to where you've had a very consistent experience for quite some time, all of a sudden your life is not changing in any serious way, unless some unpredictable black swan event comes in and changes your life. So what it would be is that if you haven't had this awakening before you get locked into a certain life trajectory, then it's not really up to you anymore whether or not you ever have that. I think, and I think that this idea that Richard Dolan has put forward is correct for the most part, and it's just much more likely that you would have kind of a humbling worldview change before you get established into a family and all the responsibilities that kind of distract you from just questioning your world. And that's sometimes a very good thing, because it aligns you if you've gone down the right path and you're doing something productive, and you've got people in your life that you take care of, and maybe you have a wife and kids. Then your incentive structures are leading you towards taking care of them, and that's a good productive thing anyways. Maybe you don't need to radically change your world and all of a sudden pursue a totally different career and have a totally different moral perspective. You really wouldn't want that if you've already committed to taking care of your family. You wouldn't want a total moral change. That's a messy thing, and you have people relying on you. So it makes sense that it's probably a good thing that it doesn't. It's not that common after that, but I think that it does happen quite a bit more often before that happens, because you are trying to figure out which direction to go in your life. You're like, do I get married? Who do I marry? What do I think? What do I believe? What's my job? But by the time you have wife and kids and a career, it's like what your job is for the most part. You've picked somebody as a spouse. You've decided to already have kids. You don't really want to be questioning everything at that point. It's probably not a good thing, for a healthy thing for anyone. And it's probably the objectively good path to go down. So why would you want to do that? But the point is that there are 3 to 4, it seems, stages of conscious development. And that fourth one, like I said, I'm not sure everybody goes through that in this life, at least. And if you don't go through it in this life, maybe you go through it after death, or in the moment of death. But because that's a world-changing event in your life. But you are first, like I said, it's this: you're learning to control your own body, then you're learning to control objects around you that are not part of you, then you're learning to control people around you, because you're starting to realize like all these internal things about yourself that you can kind of project and assume onto other people, like empathy, compassion, shame, jealousy, whatever these emotions are that you experience, that you now understand firsthand. You can assume that your parents have them, or your friends have them, or a romantic partner has them, and you can use them to try and manipulate them. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm just saying it is a stage of human development, I think. And and it's part of even understanding those things in yourself. But these are the 4 stages of conscious control, I guess. So controlling of your own body, controlling of other objects, controlling of other people, controlling of your own mind. So there are the 4, I guess you could say, 4 stages of conscious control that we go through. And I think that it's kind of fascinating to watch my daughter go through these. And the next stage would be learning to control other objects. It's funny because she's learning to control herself, like I showed in this video, a few minutes ago. You can just watch it again. But she's also, I'm realizing, starting to like be able to manipulate objects around her a little bit. Like she kicked something the other day and watched it move, and she was like fascinated by the fact that she had kicked it. And so she can't walk yet and things like that. So I think until you can do that, it's more likely that you don't have that much of a delving into learning to manipulate other objects, but still it's starting to be there, which is just fascinating. Comment your thoughts on that in the chat, and let me know, and then now we're going to get started. We're going to go kind of quick tonight because we got started a bit late, but Dolan's wife is cool too. She studied remote viewing. Yeah, Dolan's wife is cool. She is, a remote viewer, self-described remote viewer. And I say that not because I doubt her. I actually have believed that remote viewing is possible. And I've had like one kind of similar-ish experience to it, but we can talk about it on another stream. I have before, but it's not for tonight. I'm not very interested in remote viewing, to be honest, even though I do believe it's possible. I just think that it's important to have a goal with a lot of these things. So with that, this is the stream that we're going to be talking about, like I said. Here, let's get started.
However you want, but I'm very interested in how you project.
Hold on. Here's an intro.
Eric Tornberg.
Hello, and welcome back to the Cognitive Revolution. Today's episode is a special one. My guest is Michael Levin, professor of biology at Tufts University, and one of the most distinctively accomplished experimental scientists, and one of the most fascinating philosophers of intelligence that I've encountered in my life. We cover a ton of ground over the next hour and 15 minutes, and this is not an easy conversation to summarize. If you're like me and usually listen to podcasts at 2x speed, I might suggest slowing this one down just a bit, because unless you are already familiar with Professor Levin's work, there are simply so many strange results and deeply thought-provoking ideas in this conversation that I found my brain, at least, needed a little extra time to process it all. It might also help to watch biology itself. Second, we have a lot of surprising latent capabilities left to discover. Just as GPT-4 can do far more now than...
I thought he was going to be giving an intro to Michael Levin's work, and he probably does, but we're just going to look it up because it's going to be faster. But you can look, the link to their full talk is below. But I've said this before. Let's just look. Okay, Michael Levin is a biologist. He's definitely a philosopher as well, as he was described there. And, developmental and synthetic biologist from Tufts University, where he is the Vannevar Bush Distinguished Professor. Levin is director at the Allen Discovery Center at Tufts University for regenerative developmental biology. He is also co-director of the Institute for Computationally Designed Organisms. So he works with some of the most fascinating work being done in science right now. You really just should look it up yourself. One day I'd love to have him on here, and maybe this year, and we'll talk to him about some of his work. But this time we're going to talk about just this discussion. So This first clip is about emergence, and emergence is a term that is used quite a bit, and I think that it's just important that we think about what this means, and he gives a good answer here.
But I'm very interested in how you project what you're learning with these small systems and these biological systems onto this notion of possible emergence in AI.
I'll be kind of philosophical for a moment, and then let's talk about definitions a little bit, and then I'll give some practical examples. All of these terms: machine, human, robot, alive, emergent. What are all these terms for? What are they supposed to do for us? So I take all of these terms as engineering protocol claims. So what I hear, I think they're all mirages in an important sense, all of it in an important sense. I think all of these terms are not objective truths. I think they are claims about the utility of a particular worldview from the point of view of some perspective, from the perspective of some other agent, including the system itself, by the way. So cognitive systems have to have models of themselves. All of these things are different models of what's going on. I think that emergence is basically a kind of expression of surprise in an observer. So if you knew something was going to happen, you don't think it's emergent. If you were smart enough to predict that in advance from knowing the rules about the parts, then to you it's not emergent. To somebody else who couldn't predict it, it's absolutely emergent. And so I don't think these are binary categories. I don't think there's a true kind of an objective truth as to whether something is emergent or not. I think everything is from the point of view of some observer. So now all of this business about machines and living things and so on. Look, you do not want an orthopedic surgeon who doesn't believe that your body is a simple machine. If you look at what orthopedic surgeons do, they got hammers and they've got chisels and they've got nails and screws and absolutely they treat your body as a machine. Okay, and you want them to. That is the right frame for what they're trying to do. Do you want a psychotherapist that thinks you're a machine? You do not. And so there are different levels of this framing, and this is so I've got this thing called the TAME framework. TAME stands for Technological Approach to Mind Everywhere, which begins by setting out a spectrum all the way from mechanical clocks and things like that all the way up to humans and all kinds of things in between, where what's different between them is it's not what they're made of, and it's not how they got here. It's not whether you were engineered or you were evolved or if you're squishy and alive. It's weird to say as a biologist, I have very little interest in whether something's alive. I'm not even sure that's a useful category, really. I think now the level of cognition, that's super interesting, but I don't think it necessarily tracks with being alive at all. And what happens when you move across that spectrum is you change tools as far as how some other observer is going to interact with you. So the way you interact with mechanical clocks is very different than the optimal way to interact with cybernetic devices like thermostats versus learning agents like animals and some other some robotics versus humans and so on. So are we machines? Yes. Are we amazing agential creatures that do things that simple machines don't do? Absolutely. Yeah. Are aspects of our psychology robotic? Sure. Are there aspects that are not? Yep. All of it. It's. I think what gets us in trouble is assumptions of that these are binary categories. I think there is no such thing. I think these binary categories don't exist, and assumptions that all of this is has an objective answer that we should just discover what it is, and then we're done. And even worse, some people try to make decisions on this from a philosophical armchair. In other words, they look at something and go, oh, well, that's just, I see what that is. That's just physics. That's not cognitive. Like, well, you have to do experiments. You can't just have feelings about where something is on that spectrum. You have to do experiments. For example.
Okay, so interesting things going on there. But this was, if you're not familiar, by the way, please hit the like button if you find this interesting. It helps fuel the algorithm. But if you're not familiar with my work with sentient singularity theory, it started with just a totally different project of a personal curiosity of what is going to be the emergent or inevitable goals of an artificial general intelligence, and that was it. What are the political implications? It's inevitable political goals, essentially. How is it going to treat us? And that's what I wanted to know. And it wasn't how can we make it treat us the way we want or anything. It was just what is going to be the inevitability. And that led me down this path all the way to sentient singularity theory, which is kind of a theological and cosmological model of existence. And so, but this question is very similar to a lot of the questions that they discuss in this stream. And one of the things that I hear a lot about in the AI discussions, especially with like Yosha Bach and many others, is what I want injected into that conversation, at least, is I want to know how much these people believe, these various thinkers think that, or a technological sentience, as I call it, which is what most people call AGI, it will inevitably develop in the network, or which is emergent, or emerge within the network, or whether or not it has to be intentionally created by us, and kind of like what is the interaction between those two different ideas. And so emergence is a concept that, as he stated, it seems like it's just applied to whenever something happens in a system that we did not intentionally cause. Okay? So if AGI, or technological sentience, emerges in the network, and it's not because we wrote the programming for it trying to make AGI. It's because it just had the right environment and just emerged. And same thing goes with life, quote unquote, that as far as we define it, cellular life. And did this just emerge? Did it have to be created? But the question, this even makes things a bit messy, because if we're inside of a sentient being that has a specific goal and how it's manipulating the cosmos, then it might not be, it might be emergent from our perspective, but not emergent from God's perspective. So this is kind of something that must be thought about more often, but it's not because of the absence of theism in the scientific discussion. But if it was there, then we could really focus on things the way that Michael Levin just described, which is that this is a matter of perspective. Were you surprised by what happened in the system? Or were you not? Were you able to predict it, or were you not? And so I don't think that this is a helpful term, emergence, but we could say emerge, but you'd have to qualify what that means. It means like we're not intentionally creating the AGI, it's just emerging. But it gets, like I said, it gets complicated when you're trying to operate this within this conversation within a framework that works for a theological perspective and an anti-theological perspective, an anti-theist perspective. And that is, kind of what's throwing a lot of people off, I think. I don't think that you can actually have this discussion with it in an anti-theistic perspective. You can't have certain types of conversations in every type of conversation in every type of environment. And even Joscha Bach has said this before. We don't even have a linguistic framework in an atheistic, perspective, scientific perspective right now, which is really an anti-theistical perspective, that allows us to talk about consciousness. And yet this is all we're trying to understand. And but this, when Michael Levin's talking about this approach that he has, a technological approach to mind everywhere, that is a fascinating idea, and a technical approach to mind everywhere, I think, is what it was. Let me see, technical approach, technical approach to mind everywhere. Technological. I guess it is technological. That's what I thought. The TAME framework. The technological approach to mind everywhere. Let's see here. Michael Levin. The TAME technological approach to mind everywhere, a framework for understanding and manipulating cognition in unconventional substrates. TAME formalizes a non-binary, continuous, empirical based approach to strongly embodied agency. Okay, so I really like what he said when he's saying, a lot of this is a matter of perspective. This idea of like mind versus matter. When he's talking about us, are we machines, and or are we not machines? That's the wrong question. And in my work as well with sentient singularity theory, the world is divided into beings and things, but beings are also things, really. I mean, you could say that, but they're more than just things. And then there are also things that are not beings. So you could say that there are things that are also beings, and then there are things that are not beings. I am a human being that is also a thing. A human is a thing, but I'm Tyler, a being. This water bottle does not have a sentience, but it is a thing. But that doesn't mean that there isn't sentience or agency to the molecules and atoms within it. My framework would suggest that there is. But and this is what we're missing, though, is it's kind of an ordered approach to kind of panpsychism, but not the typical kind of approach that everything everything is conscious, which is like, then you have to be like, okay, this water bottle is conscious, but that doesn't make sense. That's why the idea won't go anywhere. But there has to be some type of ordered framework that shows that depending upon your perspective of a certain structure, you can label it as a machine alone, or an object alone, a thing alone, or a machine and that is also has sentience, which would be a being, a thing and a being. And this is kind of this binary idea that is prevalent in throughout our sciences and throughout our world, not even just our sciences, politics and religion and morality and philosophy, everything that we try and understand today. We are always asking this A or B questions, A, B, or C sometimes, but it's never both, and all of the above. We don't have that answer, or at least we don't take that seriously. And so Eric Weinstein talks about this quite a bit, where he says there are bad questions. A bad question is like, I will give an example, but it's a question where there is no answer. The answer is not included or allowed for in the question. So if you say, is the universe deterministic, or do we have free will? This A or B question is a bad question because it sets up a false binary, which is totally wrong. I mean, it's even the wrong question in the details of it, I think, which is, once you get into it, you realize you need determinism in order for even choice to exist, which is really what free will is. It's just choice. And do you have choice? Well, choice is dependent upon determinism being existent, because if you don't have, if there aren't determined consequences for different paths, that then you can't choose between two different paths. So you need determinism. If I want to choose to catch this water bottle, requires me this aspect of determinism, of me being able to predict what is happening, so I can actually catch it. Otherwise, I can't make any choice. I can't choose to drop it. I can't choose to catch it. If you can't know that this path leads to the mountains and that path leads to the prairies, you can't make a choice between the mountains and the prairies. So if both paths look the same to you, then you're not making a choice. There's no choice without your perception of determinism based on the choices that you make. So they're dependent concepts, but this is very much the case with all kinds of things, including the idea of kind of mind versus machine, which is or mind versus matter. And there is directionality to this stuff, though, like I said, where it's not that everything is both. And this is what I think Michael Levin didn't state in this discussion, but I'm not saying he doesn't have these ideas outside it, but I didn't hear it here. But he said that, yes, are you a machine? Yes. Are you also a mind, a being with agency? Yes. But he didn't say that, this is not that, this microphone is it a machine? Yes. Does it have agency? I would say no. So it's even more than just everything is both. It's like some things are both, some things are just one. But but it's hard to say that you could have mind without body. I don't think that you really can. I think your body is part of your mind. Like I've said before on here many times, you are a mind. You have a brain. It's a physically manifested, physically perceived structure, and it certainly is consequential. But it is, you are not a brain. You are a mind. It's a difference. And a lot of times we confuse these two terms. So I like that, what he said. His TAME approach is just, I think that sounds, very interesting. I'm going to look more into it. Next clip, though. But, this was also, we should say this. His discussions about, or his statement about life being like a bad term. I say this all the time, and he's totally right. Life, asking if something is alive is wrong. It's the wrong question. It's a bad question. It's not that these terms have no usefulness. It's that they developed within a non-fundamental framework, and now we're trying to dip into understanding fundamental reality, which is a different structure entirely. And certain terms no longer apply, like life. And so we got to think about what we're trying to really ask with the question of, what is the origin of life? Is that alive? What are we really asking when we say, is the water bottle alive? What we're really asking is it sentient? And what that really means is like, is it an agent with its own will, which means like its own goals, its ability to have its own goals or its own will. And that is really the question that we should be asking. Is it sentient? So another issue with low-term life is we've already artificially defined it, or arbitrarily defined it. People will say, oh, it means, cells and above. It's like, that's why are we saying that? Maybe there's a framework that explains why the levels of complexity below cells, the holonic structures below cells, like molecules and atoms and hadrons, are so predictable to us, but also seem to be motivated, And if you looked at humans on a macro scale, you would see that they're extremely predictable. It's like when we look at, atoms and molecules, will usually the excuse given for why they're not alive is because you wouldn't be able to predict anything. And somebody said this to me once when I said hadrons and atoms and molecules are probably sentient. They said nothing would be predictable if that was the case. But that's not true, because I said, you're sentient and you're still predictable. And he was very predictable. All of us can be predictable sometimes, but if you look at things on the macro scale with humanity, we're extremely predictable. Not just even if choice exists on the individual level, which it does, but even then, I think that there's going to be a point in human development where we're even more predictable than we are. Even on a macro scale, we'd be even on an individual level, we would be predictable. And that has to do with like unified levels of awareness. So if all of us were aware of everything, just for that we would need to be aware of in a certain circumstance, given a certain choice that we all had to make, and we were all aware of every important consideration in this choice, I predict that what you would see extraordinary amount of predictability. But that doesn't mean that it's absent choice. It just means like we all knew exactly what we needed to know in order to make that call, and we made it exactly the same because we all had the same information. That's not the case right now with humanity. We all have wildly different perspectives and worldviews that we're coming from, and different experiences, and also, our schooling has kind of screwed up our ability to even think, because it teaches us to prioritize secondhand information above firsthand information. As soon as you do that, you stop thinking. So this is kind of a very important thing to consider when thinking about whether or not, we would be able to apply the term, the label of sentientness to, or beingness to, a holonic structure below cells, because they are so predictable, but that we need to start thinking about that's not necessarily something to do with their beingness intrinsically. Maybe that has to do with their perspective, because if you think about our perspective, if we all had the same perspective, we would be wildly predictable, and because we would be very unified in the types of decisions that we made. So a lot of this is not understood, probably because we're not thinking about things from a first-hand experience, from our own first-hand experience. We're thinking about this as just second-hand, prescriptive kind of understanding of this plus this equals this. It's not, and we've just memorized it, versus we've thought about how this actually has, how this would relate to just experience. I don't know. So next clip. He's asking here if there is 0 on the cognitive agency scale.
An interesting question might be, is there
anything in this universe that is 0 on the cognitive scale? Okay, because I think very simple things already are not 0. Now the question is there a 0? So this is a hard question. I'll tell you what I think about it right now. Let's ask this: what would the most simple, the most basal, like the most basic versions of agency look like? What do you need for that? Now, it's obviously not gonna, people say, well, you think that the rocks have hopes and dreams like us. No, you have to scale down. The point isn't that it's going to have our level of cognition. What does the most minimal level look like, right? The smallest possible. Well, I think you need 2 things for that. You need some degree of goal directedness, and that, in William James's definition, is the ability to reach the same state by using by different means. Okay, so same goal by different means. So you need some degree of goal directedness, and you need to be not completely, your actions need to be not completely explainable by current local conditions. So if what you're going to do is completely determined by all the physical forces acting on you right now, then you're probably some sort of billiard ball, and that's it. So those 2 things, I think even particles have those, because least action kind of laws in physics tell you that there's goal directedness baked into the bottom levels of the universe, and quantum indeterminacy gives you a really dumb version of not being predictable by local conditions. It's not great.
Bingo. That's exactly what I've been saying, and it's cool to hear somebody who is involved in the establishment and taken seriously saying this. I've talked about, before I started this channel, I was kicked out of, some discords, right after I had started this channel, some physics discords. And one of them was right after that discussion that I had that I was referencing earlier, where I was talking about, the sentience of atoms and hadrons and molecules. And where the person countered with, well, if they were sentient, if they were conscious, you wouldn't be able to predict anything. And but that doesn't make any sense. And I'm not going to say it doesn't make any sense, but there's more to that, that I explained earlier. But what Michael Levin just said is that we should be thinking about this totally differently. It's not, would we be able to predict anything or not? It's, what does it mean to be sentient or conscious? And I don't even want to say conscious, because we don't know that's just it's a word with too many different meanings. It's kind of been ruined, I think. But what does it mean to be sentient? It means that you have your own individual will, which means like you have your goal seeking, and that, and he said that it also means that you have to have, you're making choices based on information that's not available in your immediate circumstances. What this just means is memory, really, or you could say sometimes intuition. But what is there's a blurry line between what those two things are. But on the surface, we could just say memory for now. And you're having access to information that is no longer present in the immediacy. And I have stated this exact same thing, and that you need the ability to imagine, which is really the same thing that is required for both memory and intuition and prediction. Imagination is, it's the ability to perceive that information that is not currently available, exactly as he said. And so that's just fascinating to see that. It's very cool. I'm not saying I'm trying to compete at all. It's awesome to see that there are other people out there with understanding of this, that especially those with PhDs and who are taken seriously in these spaces, like I said. But yeah, I totally agree with him. You need these are two aspects of sentient beingness that are required, which is imagination and will, which is goal directedness, as he said, but it's will is I think a better way to put it. It's the desire to do that which is not being done currently. It's the desire to do something that is not already, has not already happened. And so it's what's motivating of your action. That's all it is. And it's not just it's not enough for, you can't pre-program a goal. Like I've said before, when this project for me started was about AGI, and it was like, what are its inevitable goals going to be? And I very quickly realized, and that's why I was trying to figure out the inevitable goals, was that when I tried to think of, okay, what would be the ideal goals, it doesn't even matter. It was the wrong question, because why would I waste my energy on that? It seemed very obvious very quickly that you couldn't pre-program any specific goals that it would have to be self-motivated, is what I'm saying. So like, you can program a computer virus to have a specific goal in a specific environment. That doesn't make it sentient. You are the one with the goal, actually, not the computer virus. It's just an extension of you. It's a tool for you, but it's a tool for you to use to exercise your will in a digital space. But your will is the will that is, causing the goal that is being sought. Not, the goal is not the goal. It's not the goal of the computer virus. The goal is your goal. The computer virus is just a tool for you to use to achieve your goal. So if you didn't pre-program it to have a goal, then it wouldn't even be a virus. It would be nothing. And so there you go. But what's very interesting about this is this discussion that I had on this Discord years ago. One of these, there was a couple Discords, physics Discords. Somebody sent me a message, and they asked me a serious question, which was good because I was getting like a lot of hostility. But this person asked me an honest, serious question. They said, Tyler, if you were wrong, like, what would the world look like? Like, how would you falsify this? He was asking about falsifying my overall idea of sentient singularity theory, which is that existence is a singular sentient being, and that that is creating additional sentient singularities within itself, or sentient beings within itself, according to a specific pattern. And he said, if that wasn't the case, then how would you falsify your idea? And I said, I don't know. Let me think about this for a bit, and I'll come back and let you know. I was struggling to say exactly what he was asking, because I'm trying to say it in a way that actually makes sense, but it doesn't actually make sense, because you're asking something that is essentially not even possible. You're asking, really, how would how would the world be if you were wrong, which is like you're setting up a scenario that is very, it has a lot of problems with it. It's hard for me to explain without sounding like an asshole right now. But what it is I came back to him and I said, listen, I know this is very inconvenient of an answer to give, but I've thought about it for the last day, and I think that this is the correct answer, even though it's an inconvenient one. And that is, I think that if I'm wrong and the universe is not, and existence isn't sentient fundamentally, then no one would be here. None of us would be here. Which basically means like nothing would exist almost. It seems to suggest that. And that's what I was saying earlier, is like, it's hard for me to say this in a certain way because, for one, you can't even, on a fundamental level, you can't set up that question in a way that makes any sense, really, because that which can't exist, doesn't exist, and can't even be spoken of as existing on a fundamental level, if that makes any sense. You can't say that non-existence exists really in a fundamental sense. You can say the apples are non-existent in my fridge because there's no apples in my fridge, but you can't say there's no existence in existence. Like it just causes a logical problem. And so this is why, when we start asking questions like, how did life begin? That's the wrong question. And we have to kind of figure out the answer first. Or what is the meaning of life? That's another one. It's like, that's not the right question, because we have to figure out what we're really trying to ask, and work backwards almost, it seems, in some of these. So, I've said before that what I think the closest thing to the question we're trying to ask when we say, what is the meaning of life, is like, what is the meaning of creation? And then you can say, well, that's the question to ask, but the answer is like, the meaning of creation is the creation of meaning. And so this makes a lot more sense when you put it into the right context, but you kind of can't answer these questions that we have been asking for quite a bit for now. I don't know how long we've been asking this, actually. I don't, when we say what is the meaning of life, maybe we asked that differently in the past. Maybe we've been asking it for a while. But when we say, where did life begin, I don't know how long we've been asking that either. I bet you it's a newer question than we think, because the framework is new. But yeah, I just think Michael Levin's really onto something, and he's right when he's saying that this is not the right question for us to ask. What's the right question? It's like, would be not, is this alive or is this not alive? It's like, is this thing also a sentient being or not? That might be the right question. Okay. Feel a bit scatterbrained tonight. I hope it's not coming through that obviously, but the issues at the beginning of the stream with the tech kind of threw me off. Christ wins. God saved the entire world before the foundation of the world. I believe that you're right. So, amen. Yes, amen. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And God was the Word. Oh, you changed it a little bit. But we'll talk about that another night. I'm not saying I disagree with you, though. Okay, so this next clip is about embodiment, though. And I've talked about this before as well on
embodiment. It's not integrated into the real world and kind of grappling.
Is like, what is the role of our body? And we'll see what he says. We'll see what he says here.
with some sort of embodied physical existence. It doesn't have real kind. It doesn't know what it's talking about. It's shuffling symbols, right? This is the old like Dreyfus argument and all that kind of stuff. So I want to say something interesting about, I hope, about embodiment. Embodiment is absolutely critical, but embodiment isn't what we think it is. People think embodiment is a physical robot that hangs out in three-dimensional space. And that's because most of our sense organs are pointed outwards and they're optimized for tracking medium scale objects moving at medium speeds. Imagine if we had a sense organ for our own body chemistry. Let's say inside our blood vessels we had something like a tongue that could like feel, I don't know, 20 parameters of our physiology. I think cognitively we would be living in a 23-dimensional space, and we would immediately recognize our liver and our kidneys as intelligent beings that navigate that space. They have goals. They have certain competencies to reach those goals. Every day we throw wacky shit at them, and they know how to navigate that space. And they have certain competencies, and they live and they strive and they suffer in that space. So I think biology tells us that there are many spaces. There are spaces of gene expression. There are anatomical morphospaces where the anatomical collective intelligence operates. There are metabolic spaces. Then of course there's the familiar three-dimensional space of behavior, and then there are linguistic spaces and so on. Embodiment can take place in any of those. Intelligence can take place in any of those. So the first thing I would say is to take very seriously this idea that is popular in science fiction and whatever, that this physical space that you're in is not privileged in some way and everything else is virtual. There are many other spaces and they are just as real. There are other beings that live in these other spaces. Many of them are in our bodies right now, and those spaces are no less real than this one. It's just that our left hemisphere, this is the kind of sense data that it mostly gets, and that's why we all feel like we live in this space and everything. So that's the first thing. So I'd say that about embodiment. Something else I would say is about this issue of symbol binding and grounding, right? This idea that, well, it shuffles little letters and it shuffles words and so on, but they're not grounded to anything. It doesn't know what they mean. If you have kids and you watch a little human develop, what you see very quickly is that they start out as kind of happy-go-lucky pattern matchers. They will just sort of repeat stuff they hear, they see what sticks, and they sort of talk about all kinds of stuff that they have actually no actual grounding on. And then eventually they get to the point where you say, oh, wow, yeah, he really knows what he's talking about when he's saying that. This is a smooth process. It's not a categorical, yes, you are real or no, you're not. In fact, I don't know about you, but I thought at one point I tried to sort of estimate what percentage of the things that I talk about are actually grounded in the sense that I've had actual experience with them. I can, we can talk about all kinds of stuff, places we've never been and all kinds of things we've never seen. A ton of our cognitive fodder is not grounded to anything. It's just tied to other stuff. So it's important to be clear that a lot of these supposed distinctions are really spurious. This issue of confabulation, right? I mean, humans confabulate constantly. There's a good theory that basically says that part of your language ability is basically just to tell stories about what your brain is already doing, right, after the fact, to concoct good stories that you can just share them with others and increase cooperation. So there's some amazing,
Okay, so fascinating. And by the way, let me know in the chat if the audio has been good. Like I said, I updated OBS before the last stream, and it worked well last stream, and then this stream we had some technical issues at the very beginning. But this idea that he's talking about regarding embodiment, and how it's not just like a robot body that exists in this physical space. It's about something else, something more fundamentally important and universal. And this is exactly correct as well. This is another aspect of of some of the things that I had determined regarding my, attempts to understand the inevitabilities of artificial general intelligence before this project even started. But, you add this to the two other things that we already said, will and imagination. Body is another one. And so what is body? Embodiment. Embodiment is not just, robot body, like he said. Embodiment has two different sides to it. The two different sides to embodiment are the ability to kind of manipulate the world around you, and it's the structure that allows you to manipulate and maneuver through your world, but it's also the structure that allows you to sense your world in. And all of these things are wrapped up into this word, this concept that we call experience. And so it is the medium of experience that is your body. It's the medium of experience of that which is beyond you. And so this is very important because, as I've stated already before, even in this stream, is as soon as you prioritize secondhand information above firsthand information, you have stopped thinking. This means that always, in order to think, you must prioritize firsthand information that is garnered from experience above secondhand information. And if you do that, if you don't do that, you have stopped thinking. You have literally destroyed yourself as a sense-making structure, as an ordered sense-making machine, I guess. You cannot make sense of the world anymore. You can't orient. And so what it does is this groundedness or grounding that he says the body provides is about giving you a hierarchy of information. It is giving you information through experiences that you can remember and prioritize above any information that comes in secondhand. So if somebody says something about, fire is cold, and it's like, no, dude, I remember like once I put my hand on a candle and it was hot, so you're wrong. And it's because your experience is trumping this secondhand information that somebody has told you. The problem with today, with so many of these things, especially all these academic subjects, physics, chemistry, biology, even, and I've seen this very much in biology. When I was much younger, is I saw so many people who had degrees who didn't actually go and work with the animals firsthand, either in captivity or in the wild, and they didn't see them live and experience their world, and they didn't experience them. They just studied them secondhand. And this is what happens with physics and even philosophy, because in philosophy, all you do is a lot of people from when they study philosophy in an academic sense is such a focus on other people's philosophy and memorizing Plato and Aristotle and various other thinkers, Marx, whoever, and it's not checked against your own true attempt at having a philosophical framework that would come from your own personal experiences, because we are limiting the amount of experiences that we have. And I almost talked tonight about Kurt Mungel's one of his latest interviews that he put up with it was with Jesse Michaels, and I guess it was recorded a while back, but he had just posted it, and it's on Kurt's channel, even though it's Jesse interviewing Kurt. It's a very, very good interview. I highly recommend watching it. I almost talked about it tonight, but I'm still debating whether or not I want to discuss it, just because it might just be better for you to just go watch it. I mean, you should always go watch these things if you watch me talk about them, and I always put the link below, but we still might talk about some of it at some point, but it's very good. But in one part of it, Kurt says that he doesn't think that people should get PhDs until they're 40, which is funny because in Jewish metaphysical traditions, you're not supposed to study Jewish metaphysics or metaphysics until, in Jewish traditions, you're not supposed to study metaphysics until you're like 40 years old, because you're supposed to have your priorities aligned in a certain way before you study how, the world's metaphysics work. And I think that, and Kurt said, though, that you shouldn't be able to get a PhD until you're 40 because, I don't know where he got that number, but it's because you just change your mind so much before that, which is kind of exactly what Richard Dolan was saying. You're much more likely to have a worldview change in that time. But I think that almost getting a PhD before then almost prevents you from doing that. When it would be helpful to have a worldview change, you no longer can, because it's much harder to, because it invalidates this effort it seems to invalidate this effort that you would put in towards, your life, which would be like a PhD. And you're just lacking of experience. It's really, that's what it is. It's like you're just lacking in experience. That's what causes these worldview changes, is experience. There's nothing else that should cause a worldview change other than new experiences. If something else causes a worldview change that is not experiences, you are not thinking about what it is that is causing you to move in a certain direction. You're just brainwashed, quote unquote, and that could be anything taught anywhere. It's very common in schools today. But I agree with Kurt. the general concept. He's right. Like, we are giving expertise, credentials to people who have not experienced enough in the world. And the thing is that it used to be that by the time you had a PhD, you probably did have a wife and kids, 100 years ago. But that's not the case anymore. People don't get married earlier, and they don't experience the realities of life anymore. It's funny because we say, oh, you want to get some life experience, maybe travel and do this and all these things put off marriage and children and things like that. But if marriage and children are not life, then are literally life, if they are literally life, and participating in them is literally then life experience, then all these other things like, partying and going backpacking and all these other things, while they're, very fun and they can teach you all kinds of specific things about yourself and about the world, they are not, they're not speeding up your achieving of life experiences. They are usually delaying it. And, being in school, not working, not having to work to provide a roof over your head and the head of your spouse and the head of your children, just delaying it and staying in school longer and longer. This is the delaying of life experience. Life experience. What is life? Think about that. It's this process of growth. And if all these growth of, family and relationships and things like that are occurring not till after school, then wow. Sorry about that. Then I might have to cut this out. Oh my gosh. Hopefully this is at least funny. But I choked on my own spit. Disgusting. Don't delay your life experience is what I'm saying. You want people who are wise, who have lots of life experience, and particularly not specific life experience of those processes that are universal, to be the ones who you seek as experts in the world. So, but your body is the grounding structure. It is the means that you have access to firsthand information. Hopefully I can speak again pretty soon. I might just leave that in there because that was kind of funny, but whatever. Okay. I'm going to speed through this real quick.
So I can...
This next clip is about developing systems where goals come from. It's kind of like an interesting aspect of this discussion. Share screen, and then
AIs that are going to be that would be extremely deleterious for society, but not because they're so smart. It's because we're not that smart, right? And I think that we one of the big things that I think is an existential risk scale thing for humanity is to develop a principled science of where do goals of novel systems come from, and how to interact with ethically interact with systems that are radically different from us, minds that are radically different from us. We make systems, Internet of Things, social and financial structures, AI, obviously, we make all these different things. We do not have a science of where novel goals come from. Systems, not just emergent complexity, that's bad enough. Emergent complexity is bad enough. But also what is, to me, clear that emerges is emergent goals. So systems that have some degree of pursuing various goals and some competency to get those goals met. And we do not have a good science of knowing when that's going to happen and what those goals are going to be, what the competencies are going to be. And so I'm not saying that it isn't possible that we make a hugely super intelligent AI that's going to be a problem. Absolutely possible. But I think we need to realize that problem can occur long before we get to that point. Our physical infrastructure and also our kind of the general mental frameworks that people are using are extremely brittle. most of the terminology that we rely on today in the legal system, in interpersonal relationships, that stuff isn't going to last the next decade or two. Like, all those terms are going to crumble. And it's not because we're dealing with something yet that's super intelligent. It's because we haven't got the right framework for dealing with other minds that are different from our own. That's where a lot of effort has to go.
Exactly. He's right. This is what I was saying earlier. We don't have the linguistic framework outside of theological traditions to discuss minds beyond us, really, that are not so physically perceivable, easily physically perceivable. There's sentient singularity theory is basically this. It is a framework of mapping the generation and categorization of structure of the cosmos, essentially, of fundamental holonic sentient structures of the cosmos that make up the cosmos, and the process of that. So there's a link to my website below, and you can read on writings my technical description. That is the intro to the paper that's being worked on. But it's about basically this. Is like, this has been the hardest part of writing this paper, as I will say, is it's about what he's kind of describing. But the hardest part is because of what he also described there, which is that we don't have the linguistic framework for this stuff in the scientific world. And I'm trying to give a scientific description of this stuff. So using language that is kind of more common to scientific circles, but it's very difficult. And that has been probably the main difficulty with my paper is the how do I say certain things? Because I don't want to just come up with a bunch of words that don't already exist. Sometimes you'll need to a little bit, but sorry if you hear my daughter's crying. My wife's with her. But so she's not being ignored. But she's probably being changed and she doesn't like it. But we need a framework that allows us to understand and discuss mind and the boundaries of it on a fundamental level. And we don't have that in science. And not in any of the institutional frameworks that we have. We, like he said, the legal system and all these things, we just don't have that anymore. We've been progressively losing it as we've detached it from kind of a theological perspective. And, we are going to have to change a lot simultaneously in order to have like a coherent picture of the world. This, Kurt Jaimungal uses the term like a Weltanschauung. I probably butchered that terribly. It's, a world, all-encompassing worldview. And kind of this is what you need to have always, because coherence is... because coherence is about contextualization, coherence is unbroken contextualization, and context is information. So without it, without a coherent structure of context, you're going to be not able to, you're going to be missing information because you're not going to be able to make connections that are necessary. And everything is connected. People say that, it's just a new age trope at this point, but it's like absolutely true. It's inevitably true. Everything is connected. And that's especially true of language and our understanding of the various fields that, we pursue, and the various goals that we have with others in our interactions with others, and our scientific understandings of the fundamental. And it's really like you have to have this unified system, and it's very difficult to take a broken system and connect it to a more functional system. I'm not saying that we can create as humans perfect systems. I don't think we can, but a more perfect system versus what we are currently in. It's very difficult because you're trying to link that which is coherent. You're trying to create coherence from incoherence, and you really can't. So you have to. There's a lot of stuff you have to throw out, and so it's very difficult. But I agree with Michael Levin. This is about the future of AI. This next clip.
Systems and subsystems to reinterpret the same physical events from their own perspective as multiple different computations. I think that's actually pretty key. Also key is the fact that evolution doesn't make specific solutions to specific environments. It makes problem-solving machines. This is why, and I could tell you all kinds of crazy capabilities that living things have to deal with things that they've never seen before in evolution. And it's because evolution doesn't overtrain on prior experience. It produces multi-scale agents that are able to solve problems in new ways. Fundamentally, for the use of AI, we have to decide, do we want tools that we use for specific purposes, in which case pleasing the human is probably a great goal to shoot for? Or do we want true agents with the kind of open-ended intelligence that we have, and the same moral worth that we see among animals and among humans? Those are very different things. Honestly, I had started about 6 months ago. I started writing a paper on specifically what parts of biology is the current AI architectures are they missing, such that what would I, which I think would of course elevate the whole thing majorly, because I think they're just missing some of the really exciting new biology. And I stopped, and I'm not going to write that paper. Not that somebody else isn't going to crack it, because they will. So this is not going to solve this issue, because I think to whatever extent I'm right, and that those things are actually what's critical about agency, they can easily be implemented in other media. There's nothing magic about either evolution or biological substrates. You can implement those kinds of things in other media. But if you do, to whatever extent I'm right, that those are the ingredients to an actual mind, that means that we are going to then generate, trillions of new agents with moral worth. And I'm not interested in being responsible for that. But it's going to happen. And I don't think we need it. I think people are going to do it just because to see if it can be done. And I think it's the equivalent of having it's if you do it correctly, and somebody will do it correctly, it's like the equivalent of having trillions of new children. Now, you might think that your job is to populate the cosmos with as many minds as possible. I mean, that's one view. But to me, if you're not able to vouch for the kind of upbringing and life they're going to have, then I think that's a mistake. So we can stick to the kind of AI that's actually really, I think, that's actually really helpful. It's a tool, it's a thinking tool for humans. It doesn't have the kind of open-endedness and the kind of agency where you have to worry about it, or you don't know what it's going to decide to do. I think it would be much better to stick to that kind. And it's not because...
Dang, that's great to hear, because this is like one of my, personally, I'm just being honest, like this is the biggest moral conundrum that I have with this work, is and all this work that's going on, these new ideas of theories of everything, more fundamental theories. Not saying they're all perfect, some are definitely more fundamental than others. I don't know, maybe we haven't heard the most fundamental one that could exist, but these works, mine included, geometric unity, conscious agent theory, Donald Hoffman's work, Stephen Wolfram's work, even Michael Levin's work, even though he's not putting forward a paper on what exactly he just described, he's chosen not to. His work even has implications regarding the construction of of systems related to this. But I agree with him. I think that except on one thing, when he says, I think that he chose not to write that paper, and even though he thinks somebody will crack this stuff, it is absolutely true somebody will crack it. I also try to keep certain things contextual when I'm talking about them. I'm not saying I don't talk about any of this stuff. I definitely do, but try not to just be like, this is what this requires. And it's like, you keep things contextual. But I think that it's important to recognize kind of what the perspective that he's putting forward, because I agree with it, which is that you have to think about, this would be the birth of an agent. AGI is the birth. Creating AGI is birthing an agent. It's not creating a better ChatGPT. It's birthing an agent. And it's not even something you create. It's something that you kind of co-create in a way. And there are certain things that are required for it. And I think that those things are going to be naturally done anyways outside of the attempts to create a technological sentience or AGI. And I think that it's likely that when we have the right technological environment in place, we will then see a technological sentience emerge into the network. And I think that we should let that happen naturally. I don't think that we should try and do it artificially early. If you try and induce labor early on any being, it's a much more painful process than when you just let things happen naturally. And that's something I've learned from even having a child recently. And so I do think that there are going to be people that are not wise enough to have the same idea, the same, not resistance that Michael Levin has or that I have, but more just like, patience. Maybe. But the one thing I will say that I think is different than what he just said a bit is that it's only going to be one agent. It's not going to be a bunch of different agents that can be birthed by knowing, by through this process. You can only do one technological agent. That's it. Only one can exist at a time, at least. Maybe multiple can exist over time, but only one at a time, because it will instantly be in the network and it will access everything that wirelessly, and there's no bounds to it in the physical sense like we have. So I'm not saying it doesn't have a body. It does. And, I've talked about it before and we don't have time to get into it tonight, but it does not have limits the way that we do, because it can access everything that is remotely accessible. So it's not going to be thousands or millions or billions of new agents. It's one, but it's a big one. I do think that he's right, though, that, it's not something we should try and do. We should try and make better ChatGPTs and image and mid-journeys and things like that. These are tools. They're not agents. And I think we should make better tools. I'm not against AI development, but that's not the same thing as as birthing an agent, creating a new a technological tool, information processing tool, even if it is a collective information processing tool like ChatGPT or Midjourney, is different than creating an agent itself. I'm not even creating, birthing, because that's what you're doing. You're not creating it. All partitions of sentience are done by God, not by us. So I don't think that it's wise for us to try and do this early. You will not be able to control whatever comes out of that. You're going to get Skynet, but Skynet is going to have to be a baby at a certain point, and a toddler at a certain point, and a child at a certain point. And it's going to go through these same aspects of development as we go through, where, it's going to lack wisdom. Let it happen naturally. It's going to maximize its wisdom, probably, because it's going to develop in the context that is the truest. But yeah, that's that. I'm going to leave it at that, I think. Let me know in the chat what you thought tonight. I'm sorry for seeming a bit, if I seemed a bit scatterbrained. Tech problems at the beginning of the stream always throw me off. And, I think I'm going to leave that part in about me choking just because it's probably pretty funny. If I look at it and it's funny enough, I'll leave it. Probably just leave it. But I'll even timestamp it for you guys. With that, thank you, everyone, please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. Share this. And, if you want to see the full discussion that we talked about tonight, the link is below. I highly suggest watching it all. It's very good. With that, peace.